Welcome to the Iconic Conversation series. This is our June conversation on getting game ready to make career moves. I want to start by acknowledging the First Nations people of the lands across the whole of Australia and acknowledge their enduring connection to country, knowledge and stories, and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm located in Sydney and the owners of the land here are the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I will now introduce myself. I'm Edina Jacobs, and together with my partner, Bobby Marlab, we started Mentor Walks 5.5 years ago with the intention of bringing quality mentoring experiences to women everywhere to drive a gender equal world. And one way to make a difference in your world is to do one thing, big or small, for another woman after your experience here today. It could be something small, like checking to see if someone's okay, or something big, like calling out an injustice when you see it playing out in front of you. This is the conversation series started back in mid-2020. The very first one came about when some of our mentors came to us asking what they could do to support women in our community in the face of this global pandemic that was unfolding in front of us. The first one was run by Lynley Edwards, and it was a topic that was front of mind at the time, which was fear of losing your job. And since then, our mentors have continued to give their time and share their expertise and experience around areas of concern and interest for our mentees and our community. This is our 21st conversation series event. All the previous sessions are up on the Mentor Walks YouTube page, and this one will be up tomorrow as well. Partnership with the Iconic that allows us to bring you these monthly free to attend conversation series events. So I want to take this opportunity to thank their CEO, Erica Berchtold, and her team for supporting us and our community. And now to what you're all here for today, our conversation on getting game ready to make career moves. This is an extremely relevant subject at the moment. A recent survey of our Mentor Walk community showed us that 48% of our mentees had changed roles in 2021. And Deloitte's Women at Work 2022 report had found that over half of the women were aiming for new employment opportunity over the next 2 years. So you might be here because you're thinking of changing jobs or roles in the near future. Maybe you're right in the thick of the job hunt now. Maybe you're looking at a complete industry and role change, or maybe you're looking for a similar role in a new team, in a new business, or even in the same business. Whatever situation you're in, Suzie McInerney is here with us today to help us navigate these waters. Suzie is a committed mentor for us in Melbourne, and today she'll walk us through everything we need to know to get game ready for, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there for 1 second.
For a career change.
Yes, I know, that's exactly right. Including honing transferable skills, building and managing a personal brand, and sharing actionable tips to take into interviews, as well as advice on how to effectively manage relationships with recruiters. Suzie has been with 6 Degrees Executive for 12 years and has been CEO since 2019. 6 Degrees, for those of you who aren't aware, is a leading independent executive search and recruitment agency that specialises in placing top talent in key industries and commercial disciplines across the eastern seaboard of Australia. Suzie's worked with global and national clients, including Walt Disney, Nike, Grilled, Officeworks, Mecca Cosmetica, API Priceline, Mattel, and Coles, amongst others. With a background in consumer and brand marketing before this, Suzie landed in recruitment initially as a consultant new to the industry and quickly progressed through the organisation into key leadership roles as the organisation grew. Prior to becoming CEO, Suzie was the Victorian State Director for a number of years and took on special projects, including championing the firm's diversity and inclusion strategy. Suzie led the business through the extremely challenging period of COVID and post-COVID, if that's what we can call it these days, with a brave, not perfect mantra, and has more recently driven the recovery and transition to new ways of hybrid working, which has resulted in the most successful period of the company's 18-year history. Suzie is very passionate about developing strong leaders and driving a positive culture built on the principles of inclusion, holistic wellbeing, and continuous learning. She holds a double degree Bachelor of Business Marketing and a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, which I also studied. And she also once owned and operated a hatted 200-seat restaurant, and she's a very proud mum to 2 children. Suzie, I'm exhausted just knowing all of that about you.
My goodness. Yeah. In my mind, I'm like, we really need to edit down that wherever that bio came from.
No, I love it. I took bits out and added bits in because I only included what I thought was important for our community to know. So I'll hand over to you in a second. I just want to very quickly run through with everyone the format of today. Susie's going to be talking for 30 or 40 minutes. She'll be running a couple of polls throughout, so please get involved. They're anonymous, and it really just helps her take the temperature of the group that's in the room with us today. She'll be keeping an eye on the chat as well, so if there's something really important during the talk, you can drop it in there. But she'll probably address most things along the way. So if you can, try and hold your questions to the end. There will be time for 10 or 15 minutes at the end where Susie's going to address questions that you can drop into the chat. And also, just before she starts, I'll ask you to please make sure that on your screen, your name is your full name. It helps us understand who's here with us today. So thank you, Suzie. I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Edina. And I did really want to start today by saying I am hugely grateful to be asked, and very grateful that everyone has chosen to spend this hour at the end of the day with me. But more than that, my association with Mentor Walks has been really incredible. It's such an amazing organisation. So I'm really grateful to be able to, give something back to the organisation, and as I said, to Mentor Walks and to Iconic for making this session possible. And hello to all of you from home or work or wherever it is that you join tonight. And yeah, I think it is clearly a very topical conversation for good reason. So I'm really hopeful that over the next 30 minutes, I can share some of my insights in relation to the job market and some kind of trends in terms of talent that will be important for people to understand. Weave in some practical tips in terms of how to get game ready, and then also, I guess, share some of my own experiences as far as, to a degree, my career and how things have panned out. But I'm looking forward to the chat. Would love everyone to get involved in the poll so I can get a bit of a sense of who's on the call and where you're at in relation to your job seeking journey. And of course, very happy. I'm a bit of an open book, so happy to answer any questions at the end that people are interested in. And I will also say that there is so many resources and so many people in our organisation that are prepared to help job seekers. So would love a follow-up from anyone who's interested. So we'll get stuck in, and of course I can save you all a little bit of time in saying that, just the next one, Nish. Thank you. I'm not going to repeat that whole introduction, but I am going to just mention that that particular story, I guess, is one that is relevant to our conversation. I call it the scenic route, and that is that when I went to university and I studied marketing, I really did assume that my career would take this quite linear path, and that I'd go off and get a marketing job, which I did initially, and that I would work my way up the so-called ladder in marketing. That was the intention, and obviously what actually played out looks quite different. I feel like I've had three very separate career chapters, but actually what we'll talk about today is that there is some kind of common threads in terms of how those things have fit together. So some themes there in terms of transferable skill sets and how important they are. And also around the power of networks, and that the ultimate opportunity often that you don't even know you're looking for is sitting right in front of you in terms of a conversation that you have with someone who will open your mind to an opportunity to do something quite different in your career. I wrote there, I'm a huge believer that great leadership is the secret sauce in any organisation, and I've really committed myself now to becoming the best possible leader I can, and ultimately, think it's very hard to argue with the idea that a really positive culture where people come together and thrive is ultimately what unlocks business success. So again, that concept of, with the end in mind, what are the kind of skills and experiences that people should be building such that you can kind of fulfill your purpose. So it feels like a kind of a roller coaster ride of things to have done, but actually I'm very grateful for all of the experiences that I've had along the way, and really excited now to be in a position where I'm leading 6 degrees, 100 people across 3 states, and we really commit ourselves to supporting people of all genders and race and age as best we can, to really find a career that fulfills them. Our purpose is unearthing talent and shaping futures. And we're really proud of the work that we do to contribute to the success of organisations that we service, but even more than that, to, I guess, paying forward opportunities for individuals to really fulfil their career ambitions and to live a great life, but also a great life at work. So thank you very much. We'll kind of get stuck in, I think, with a little bit of a holistic explanation from my perspective around the landscape that we're currently operating within when it comes to talent and the labour market. Some of you may be really up to date with a lot of this information, and there's plenty of content to support some of the themes that I'll talk about here. But clearly the pandemic created a very different environment for job market and job seekers. And as Edina rightly pointed out, for a period of time, it was purely about this insecurity of what will the impact be to my particular job. Lots of people made redundant, lots of people living in this kind of ambiguity of not knowing, what the impact of the pandemic was going to be. Stand down, re-employment. It really was initially a very volatile labour market with lots of shifting and moving. We then found for at least, in the depths of the pandemic, as people started to come out of that, people really sat tight and held on tight to the jobs that they had. And now coming, I guess, it's funny to say post-pandemic, but as we've come to live with the pandemic, the job market has really kind of come back to life in a few key ways. I should point out first and foremost that we are currently living through one of the most extreme talent shortages in Australia that we have ever seen. The obvious reason for that is around the fact that borders have been closed and that migration gap has had a significant impact on certain skills and on talent that is in very high demand in our country. So we're in a very talent short market, and really there's no industry based on the research that is immune from that, whether it's banking, whether it's healthcare, whether it's tech. All of these industries are citing that they currently have quite severe skills shortages. That's resulted also in a record number of job vacancies. And a lot of this data comes from the likes of SEEK. So more job vacancies than ever before. We have the lowest unemployment rates on record, and we also have a scenario where, as a result of that, there are very few applications coming through from a jobs perspective. So gone are the days where organisations would post an ad on SEEK and would expect, both volume and quality in terms of response. And the whole process of looking for talent has shifted. And one of the key ways it's shifted is employers are now out there seeking people out as opposed to placing an ad and kind of pulling talent towards them. So those market forces we call a candidate short market. And there's definitely some factors in relation to that would influence the way that you go about your job search. I would say it's very encouraging that it is, for all of those reasons, a great time to be looking for employment, lots of demand. It's also a really great time to be thinking about a career switch because a talent shortage effectively means organisations need to think differently about how they attract talent to their particular business. So we'll talk a little bit about that skills transfer and I guess the permissibility of someone who may not have tenure or experience in a certain industry or in a certain role now being, more able, I guess, than ever to be able to paint a really compelling case as to why they have skills that could transfer successfully to those types of roles. New ways of working is a really interesting one because obviously what that's also meant is that some of the rules have changed in terms of, where people would be thinking about working. So that's also meant that where historically you would be looking for a job in the same state or the same city that you live, it does open up opportunity for businesses and for talent to think about, is it possible for me to perform a particular role, even though it's not the case that I'm in the proximity of what was once a head office. So there's factors that are interesting in terms of geography. There's also factors that are interesting in terms of the way that organisations are adapting to really what it is that this new world of work requires. Best example for that might be to think about someone who has, and this is a completely made up example, always wanted to work at Tesla. You know, Tesla is an amazing brand and it's, you know, progressive and whatever else. As people start to kind of make decisions, or organizations make decisions about what their new world of work is going to be, and in Tesla's case, everyone must be in the office for 40 hours a week, it really does impact, I guess, from a candidate or job seeker's perspective, the information or the understanding that you would need of potential employers in terms of just how aligned those new ways of working are to what is important to you. So where previously we'd be thinking about what is the location of this particular office and what salary am I going to be paid, there is a whole other realm of considerations for job seekers that need to be taken into account to work out really what a future potential employer looks like. So new ways of working, really important to understand. A lot of organisations grappling with this. They can't always articulate exactly what that looks like. So your level of comfort around that ambiguity becomes important. The Great Resignation, well, as you also described, Edina, there has been, you know, lots of movement after that initial period of people sitting tight. There was a view at the end of last year, based on some of the trends coming out of the US and UK, that people would come back in the new year, really having kind of come out of the pandemic, you know, the depths of the pandemic, and make decisions about changing roles. So now is the time for change. The organisation I'm currently working for may not be now aligned with what I'm looking for. And in some cases, it was also about the reflection for many that occurred deep in lockdown and through that period that was expected to result in people saying, I need to do something that's more aligned to my purpose. In some cases, I have scar tissue from that period of employment through COVID with this particular business, and I just need a fresh start. We have seen some of that, but by no means has the Great Resignation hit our shores to the magnitude that it was initially forecast, but definitely lots and lots of job switching. Internal mobility has been a big thing. So organisations have got ahead of what they expected would be a resignation and are offering more opportunities for people in existing businesses to take on new challenges. So market forces, both economic and social, have dramatically changed the landscape for job seekers, number one. Number two, that breeds opportunity for people thinking about changing jobs, but it probably also changes, I guess, some of the strategy that you might employ to determine exactly what a great job looks like for you. So that's the first point. Just getting a little bit deeper in terms of what that means. Obviously, where you have a candidate short market and those demand and supply conditions are at play, it does also mean there's a little bit of a shift of the balance of power in terms of the recruitment market. Candidate market tends to mean that candidates have got more negotiating power when it comes to things like salary, and in some cases in negotiating, you know, conditions of employment that are, you know, suitable to them. It also means, as I mentioned before, that there's more headhunting going on. You would likely be more approached more often in a candidate short market than in any other market as employers seek out talent. And perhaps for people on this particular call, that may ring true. You might be all of a sudden being approached very frequently on LinkedIn. It is a really good point, though, that you have to expose yourself to the opportunity of being sought out. And LinkedIn is a really great example, an easy example of where having the right profile, having the right keywords and flags on your profile to suggest that you're job seeking, a couple of simple ways to make sure that, that you can be found, I guess, is one of the key things. There's a hidden job market that is, you know, particularly important for people to understand. And we will talk a little bit about this in relation to networking, because often organisations in this type of market have whole capability builds that they need to do. Not all of those roles would be live and advertised. And so it's really important that this hidden job market that is best tapped through things like networking, leaning on and partnering with recruiters is something that you can also expose yourself to uncovering. And for the reasons I spoke about before, it is also a good time for those of you to be considering a potential major career change, because that idea that skills might need to come from different places is a reality, given that employers are finding it incredibly hard to recruit. We're going to stop there just for a moment, and we're going to run our first poll, which Sophie will help me with. And this is just important because I think career change can mean many things to different people. And as I mentioned before, some of it is big change, completely new career path. Some of it is really just wanting a step up role in a different company. So we put a few categories here. I'll take a moment. If you just nominate what best describes the degree of career change that you're currently seeking, and we'll have a look at the results. Pretty even, actually. Okay. Great that there's so many people jumping into this.
I was just thinking that as well.
Yeah.
It's a great response rate. Thank you, everyone, for getting involved.
Absolutely. So let's just kind of, where we've landed is there's 30%-ish of people on this call that are looking for what I would describe big change, new career. I'm at a crossroads and I'm ultimately looking to do something very, very different. It might be different industry, different role altogether. And I would imagine that number, and I'm assuming this, is probably higher post-COVID, when we know through research that people really took time to reflect on, what it is that they wanted to do, their purpose, how they could manage a more balanced life and spend more time with family and whatever else. So I'm not surprised about that. And no doubt the kind of anxiety level for people in that realm is higher, because there's really, so much that needs to be done to really find the answers to what that is. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Industry switch. Again, I'm not surprised about this. And this might be, I'm currently in a brand role in FMCG and I'm looking to move into banking, or, just looking for, to leverage the experience I have in a certain discipline or role, but to apply it to a different industry. And the good news there is that the permissibility about that is greater than ever. FMCG is a good example where we recruit very deeply in that FMCG consumer space and have done so for the best part of 18 years. And for a long time, it was near impossible for us to put candidates, on a shortlist and into an organisation that worked in that fast-moving consumer goods space if they didn't already have experience in that space. These days, it is still valued, but absolutely, we are now presenting people who have experience in brand or in those roles, but may have gained that from healthcare or from completely different industries. And that is very much about transferability of the skill set rather than deep industry expertise, which most organisations already have in their organisation anyway. Many of you looking for a step up, it might be that, you've hit a bit of a ceiling in your existing business, or there are roles there, but there's lots of competition about those roles. And that's a more traditional, style of job seeker that we would encounter. And then there's others that are saying, I'm actually happy with my role. I'm just not happy with the organisation that I'm working for. I'm looking for a new home. So I guess that's a good kind of lead into and if we just flick over, I just wanted to spend some time just talking about my top 3 tips for job seeking. And this very much speaks to the first one of those, which I call sharpening the axe before you start cutting down trees. So if we just take that poll down for a moment, if you can, Sophie. And this is not about me suggesting that everyone go out and become working at timber yard. The preparation and reflection and research that you do before you start shooting off CVs and visiting job boards is incredibly important in informing how successful your job seeking process is. Sounds simple, but you would be amazed how many people come to see us without really having done, I call it kind of heavy lifting emotionally and spiritually and physically, I guess, to get themselves to a point where they may not have the exact answer, but they've at least started to narrow their focus on what it is they're looking for and why. Really important. Now, for those of you that are looking for a completely different career, that process is clearly going to be, more extensive. I would suggest that process may need to be scaffolded by mentors or by a career coach. We have some good tools on our website, which is very simply a set of questions that we would encourage somebody ask themselves in order to start to get clear on what it is that they would like to do as that big change. Some of those questions are quite simple, like, what am I really good at? Like, what are my superpowers? What are people in my current job, or what do they tell me that I'm really good at? And let's list those things out. What brings me most joy in my current job? What are the things I absolutely love doing? And what are the things I get out of bed for? Because those kind of, tasks or engagements or projects will help to inform the types of things that you would hopefully be looking for in a career change as well. Sometimes people say, you know what you would be great at? Like, what are the things that people say about you, or about, in terms of, the types of things that, or jobs that you might be good at? What are my hobbies? Is there any chance I could potentially get paid for doing something in this particular field? For me, there's also a consideration of what is the future of work? And is there an opportunity for me to upskill such that I can involve myself in an industry, whether it be tech, or in a role type, whether it be a data analyst or a data scientist, that is in very high demand and is one of those kind of jobs of the future. So there's a lot of inputs, I guess, to that research and reflection phase. In the flip side, if there's people saying, look, I love doing what I'm doing, I just need a new home, I want to find a new employer, there is still lots of research and lots of reflection that you can do to help understand or narrow the focus on what those target organisations are. And some of that is online, some of it is Google reviews, some of it is Glassdoor, speaking to people who worked in that business, who'd supplied, but having a bit of a consideration set in terms of the types of organisations or even specific businesses that you would like to work for, in that case, is the type of preparation that will really help when it comes to getting active, as I would call it. Recruiters can absolutely help with certain parts of this. But in all honesty, when someone comes to us and says, looking for a new job, and we start, understanding and unpacking what it is that they're looking for, if they haven't really narrowed their focus, it's often hard for us to help, because in some cases, those people can get a bit stuck between the cracks, where we're kind of, they're generally interested in lots of things, but not particularly passionate about anything specific. So number one tip for me, for everyone on this call, is really spend the time and ask yourself, have I got clear in my mind what it is that I'm looking for? And is there ways that I can get some support to getting, that clarity that then becomes important as far as what you do to seek out that particular opportunity? So that's the first thing. The next one seems obvious, this job seekers toolkit. And everyone say, yep, I've got a CV. I've done my resume. I'm on LinkedIn. I've been practicing my interviewing in the mirror, whatever it might look like. Those things are important, and I will give you some tips on those later on. And there's, again, plenty of resources on our website. For me, what is most important in terms of what you need in your toolkit the whole way through, not just a job seeking journey, but I think in life, is a really articulate and compelling narrative about who you are, what your strengths and superpowers are, and articulating your value or the achievements that you are most proud of in terms of your career to date. Spending time again to distill down the things that you're most proud of, how you would describe your skills, your superpowers. Those things take time, they take practice. And again, not just being able to develop the narrative, but being prepared at any moment to be able to talk to those things is really, really critical, because you never quite know when you're in a lift with someone, when you are sitting next to someone at dinner, or if you're in a formal interview, or if you call to follow up on a job application and you happen to speak to the hiring manager, you really do need to be prepared to be able to articulate that narrative. It needs to be memorable. It needs for people to say, oh, you're the girl who, or you're the person who did, you know, whatever else. So you've got to really distill that down. And it needs to be evidence-based. So you need to tell real stories about the impact that you have had in your career to date, such that that person can start to build their own ideas about how those values and skills might benefit their organisation. So articulating that narrative, you know, talking to people about it. This is why having 100 cups of coffee with people becomes so powerful, is that you do become quite artful in being able to describe yourself in a way that is very, very powerful. So that personal narrative is important. It also then becomes the basis or the kind of key ingredient in things like your resume, your LinkedIn page, and importantly, what you build your interview skills from. So once you've worked out, here are the 3 or 4 things that I think best bring my career and my unique value to life, they also become the things that you nail in your CV, that you are able to talk to with great depth in an interview, and that you would highlight, for example, on your LinkedIn page, so that those blocks fit together and that unique value proposition becomes really clear. Really important. And again, for anyone, regardless of what stage they're at in their career, often people come with incredible history of experience, but they don't come with that capability to be able to articulate it in a compelling way that is likely to get you hired or remembered or connected to someone else. So it's really important. The third one is building your networks. And I do want to spend a little bit of time on this one because it probably comes as no surprise, given that you're all part of Mentor Walks. Networking, and call it what you want, connections, community, is incredibly important. And I wish I had understood the importance of building, nurturing, fostering, and really leaning in on my networks earlier in my career. It's one of the most important things that is likely to get you hired, given that there is what we call this hidden job market that is very live. Organisations everywhere are looking for great talent, full stop. Leadership potential, people have certain skills or capabilities, people that might bring diversity to their organisations. Those demands and those capabilities are like an always on requirement for organisations. It may not be that that's put into a live job ad on Seek, but speaking to the right people about their capability needs and being able to connect your own experience through that narrative to that capability, absolute magic in terms of someone sitting there and saying, do you know what? I actually feel like you have something that we need. I'm going to create a role, or I'm going to introduce you to someone in our business. It's really, really critical. So hopefully, you know, everyone understands that. I did think, though, in terms of a poll, it might be, hopefully everyone's prepared to be vulnerable and honest. But the next poll just asks people for their views on the health of their current networks or contact communities, I'd say. So Sophie, do you want to pop that one up? So the question, how would you currently rate the quality of your personal, and I mean personal professional networks? Great, straight out of the blocks. Oh, wow. Yep, extremes. Well, at least everyone thinks it matters. And hopefully it's not just me banging on about that that's influenced that view. And again, I'm not particularly surprised, because I do generally feel like, you know, there's people in this world that are very, very confident and strong in terms of building those networks. And then there's a whole cohort of people that we meet that are like, that just makes my skin crawl. And they feel like networking is rocking up to an event where you stand in the corner and eat the, you know, stale chicken sandwich and scurry out of there, hoping that no one noticed you. It is absolutely, you know, critical. How you build a network and how you nurture it, though, it can be a very personal thing. Some people are very comfortable to turn up cold to events and walk around and get to know people. In other senses, a more personal style of how you like to build relationships with people also works. You just need to understand the importance of having that network, and then to nurturing it and how you tap into that network at various times through your career, not just to find a job, but for mentoring and other things as well. So we might just, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means. If we go over to the next slide, and I'm calling this Who's in Your Corner. And that does, I mean, we'll talk about recruitment consultants, but I'll just take that off my screen. Yeah, so in terms of, well, how do I know what my net, like a few people said, I don't even know what that means or whatever else. The easiest way to start mapping out your connections is, this might sound crazy, but it's like if I was going to throw a career party, like a birthday party, but to celebrate my career, who would I have in the room? My first boss, that person I worked with on a project, you know, in the second year of my employment somewhere else, someone who really helped me out, you know, through an interview process. So really just make a list if you can, or if you need to, or maybe it's on LinkedIn. Who are those people that have already played an important role in my mind, in my career? The recruiter that got you your first job, whoever it might be, start there. If you're already on LinkedIn, I would also be thinking about who are my first connections on LinkedIn. So, and there's a reason probably why you have made that specific connection with that person. So you start to kind of build out a map. It would be amazing when you start to actually spend the time to do that work, how you can start connecting the dots. Oh, that person is connected to someone else that perhaps I might be interested in speaking to. So it is as kind of simple, I think, as literally starting to build that map either on LinkedIn or scribbling down on the back of a book, whatever it looks like, looking at your contacts in your phone, your contacts in email. But absolutely think about, who am I already connected with? Gail's just made a very good point. What about the circle of influence that you're part of? And this starts to go a little bit broader as far as, I don't know, my mum's friend who also happens to be, you know, on a board somewhere, or so really start thinking about your personal connections and who they are connected to. And it's amazing when you start to think about how much this amplifies. And yeah, lots of great tips coming through, like following and engaging with people on LinkedIn, making comments on people's articles. Like it is really these days, thanks to technology and thanks to this shift that's occurred in, I guess, in life, where, you know, networking and reaching out to people and building connections virtually, absolutely a great opportunity. But mapping out those connections is the first thing. And then I would say prioritizing as a result of that, who you're going to reach out to, and being very clear in terms of exactly what it is that you're, you know, what's the request? What are you actually, because pinging someone a note and saying, hey, you know, I'm looking for a job. You never know. Someone might say, oh, great, I've got this great job for you. But we call it the 100 cups of coffee. And it's really thinking about, what is it that this person may be able to help me with? Maybe it's that they can help you to understand what your job switch might look. You might be looking for feedback about specific skills that they think that you have, or advice they might have around the types of jobs or industries you're suited to. Maybe it is a case of saying, I'm really, you know, interested in what you do, your role. I'm looking to build a career in that area, and I would love half an hour of your time so I can ask some really specific questions about, you know, how you started and what you love about it. Maybe it is a case of saying, I really want to work in this organisation, and I can see that you worked there previously. I'd love to spend some time with you to understand what that experience was like. So building connections, which is ultimately what networking is, using all the channels you have available to you in real life, virtually, through these types of communities, and then being quite specific and clear in terms of how you would love people in that network to add value. Absolutely important. Should be something that we all do, you know, as much as we possibly can. And staying connected to those people, not just hitting them up when you need something, but really having that kind of nurturing your networks is really important. And for a lot of people will actually be how they end up helping you to find a job. Katrina's just asked, how do you create the cups of coffee experience when folks are reluctant to meet? I do, definitely there'll be people that are too busy. I also think, though, if you're brave in making a request, you will be surprised how much people love helping other people. So definitely there'll be some people that don't respond. There might be some people that say, look, I just don't have time for that. But really, if you have also the people that are very willing to help and that are open to making that connection, you're one step closer to kind of your end goal as you go. So you just got to be brave. You've got to make those requests. It'll feel uncomfortable at first, reaching out, but it'll be amazing how much you build that comfort and that muscle once you start to get a sense that people are, very often really willing to help. Partnerships with recruiters. So recruiters absolutely need to be part of your job search strategy, full stop, particularly in this market where organisations are really finding it difficult to recruit directly themselves in many cases. Recruitment partners are important partners for you. Like everything though, you have to do your research to understand who you should partner with. Less quality partnerships, much better than a spray and pray approach where you're kind of managing lots of different people and lots of different conversations. There's some pretty incredible ways that you can research who you should work with, who's actually advertising what roles that I'm interested in, who's active on LinkedIn and who's posting content that I think is relevant to me and my career, and who's providing insights that are valuable. And then the engagement, who's engaging with me in a way where I feel like there's a strong partnership. And let's be honest, that won't happen every time. And I think once you find the recruitment partners that you believe you can build a really solid, trusted and transparent relationship with, lean into that relationship, leverage them for their insights, be transparent. I say stay close, but don't badger. And ultimately, be prepared that if someone is not supporting you the way that you need to, providing them with that feedback, sure. But I would say that in life, you probably do need to build, a few really solid partnerships that hopefully will last the distance. I mean, we've got, definitely candidates that consultants in our business might have placed 1, 2 or 3 times over their career, and who now are clients. That's really only possible if you're dealing with recruiters that have long tenure in their organisation. So that's one thing. Look for people who've been doing what they do, recruiting in that space for a long time, and then who are likely to have, as a result, really good access and expertise to people and jobs that are going to be of interest to you. And these days, there's all kinds of review sites and ways that you can, find out testimonials and so forth about recruiters and who's the best at what they do. And really lean on them because we have so many insights. We can provide great feedback about interviews and feedback on CVs and whatever else. So again, be specific around the support that you need, even if it's not in relation to a live job right now. Practical tips. Look, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail here because I would say there is really no excuse these days for not having an amazing CV and a really good LinkedIn. There are so many resources, including many on our site, and we've got some QR codes that will lead you to those areas. Just think about how you're positioned on LinkedIn. Keep your page really current. It is a social media channel, so the more you feed it, the more you'll get out of it. It's a really rich place to research organisations and industries and look at content on how to kind of build, capabilities. So really look at it and just, make a decision on how you can optimise your LinkedIn page. Don't forget your personal social media, which is increasingly a place that potential employers would be trying to take a bit of a look into your life. So think about how you're positioned on other channels as well. Resumes, less is best. Think of the front page like the window in a store. Absolutely has to be evidence-based. Don't make big motherhood statements that don't have any substance, and really just focus on the evidence to support the outcomes. Make sure that your resume really speaks to that narrative about what your core capability and strengths are. And job search, don't get too stuck on the title. Titles have shifted and changed and there's all kinds of trends and whatever else. So don't get too stuck on a job search when you're actually in there looking for job alerts. And the other thing too is all of this takes time. You need to set up daily rituals, which mean that you're organised in relation to follow-ups from meetings and applications you might have sent, feedback that you need from various people, setting up time to meet with people from your contacts. It has to be kind of an always-on activity for the period of your job search, and the best way to do that is to, like everything, be super organised. Again, those types of tips are all things that are readily available on our website. There are a bunch of QR codes here, lots of resources around how to nail the interview, some templates in terms of building CV. The career reflection guide is one pager that might help you in terms of that consideration around what it is that you might do next. It's very different to what you're doing now. Branding advice, actual tips on how to optimize your LinkedIn page. There's plenty of that content available on our website. Just one last poll, actually, because I'm really interested in the types of channels that people on this call are currently using most in order to find that next role. So if you pop that next one up. So which of the following channels are you currently relying on most to look for job opportunities? Yep. Yep, again, and that probably, that is the top two, Seek and LinkedIn, is pretty much reflective of where we spend our time as well. So we still do advertise on Seek, but we quite often bypass it because we just don't feel confident that the quality or volume of applications is going to be right. So if you're spending more time on Seek at the moment than anything else, there is absolutely no doubt you're missing out on opportunities that perhaps are not on that website. Important, but not critical to your job search. LinkedIn is absolutely, or has increased and kind of changed the game in terms of this monitoring or opportunity for candidates to be in the driver's seat around making connections and looking for jobs, but it's also now a really rich source of ads for jobs, and we use LinkedIn probably to that proportion, kind of 3 times more than what we use Seek, just based on the quality of response and reach that we achieve. I don't think we used to, when I first started, showing my age, we did used to place newspaper ads. I'm not surprised no one's looking there. Number one advice, for those people who, and I saw some comments there, which I'm not surprised about in terms of just landing this relationship with recruiters and really, the understanding how best to partner with recruiters. We know in our industry that one of the biggest gripes from a candidate perspective, even outside of this type of market, is that it's difficult to build relationships if people are not returning calls or, not kind of being as supportive as they can. Please have faith that there absolutely are recruiters out there that can add value to your job search. At the moment, I'm sure part of that frustration is heightened because we've never been busier in terms of the number of vacancies, and our opportunities to kind of provide general counsel to candidates, is diminished as a result of that. But that's, it's not an excuse, but it's just a reality of the kind of job market that we're currently operating within. But have faith and ask people who have successfully worked with recruiters who they worked with. Referrals are really important, and doing that research online to find out who ultimately is the leader in this field, based on what jobs they're advertising is important. And personal networks, I think, post what I've talked about today, there's definitely an opportunity there for people to lean in more. That balance, though, apart from the fact that I'd say recruiters, in my mind, should be higher, is pretty typical, we find, of how people approach their job search at the moment. And is a tip for people who maybe are looking at that saying, well, actually, I'm not even on LinkedIn. It is a really important place to be and to build your brand and build the connections that I spoke about as being so important. Just conscious of time, so I'm just going to finish with a quick wrap in terms of kind of what I wish I knew now at this stage, and I'm still learning all the time. But yeah, I mean, the scenic route's okay. I think at the time when I was faced with different crossroads, it felt a bit like, you know, my career was derailing because I was doing something completely different that I hadn't studied for. It's absolutely not just an okay thing to do, to think about your career as a series of different experiences. In my mind, it actually makes a candidate, an individual, more valuable when they've had to kind of show agility and succeeding in different industries and environments. So if that's your path, or if there's something you're considering, I would say go for it. At least kind of, you know, seek as much opportunity as you can. Be really intentional about building leadership capability. I would love for that to be a message, you know, to all females in particular. Building great leaders and leadership capability, in my mind, is still one of the most attractive things that organisations are looking for when they're briefing us. So being able to articulate your leadership capability is not something people are generally comfortable with or used to. Get really good at being able to talk about why you're a great leader, because leadership potential is probably top of the list in terms of, in my mind, what organisations look for. And I'm very grateful that I've had the opportunity to focus on leadership as being my superpower. Just be true to yourself always. If you're working in an organisation where you don't feel like you could be your genuine self, then make change, because it's bloody exhausting pretending to be someone else or wearing some kind of an armour because you don't, you know, feel like you can be seen. Really important lesson that I have learned over time. People do generally love to help. And so if you ask, and if you ask in the right way, I think you'll be surprised in terms of just how generous people are. So leverage that. And mentorship is absolutely critical both ways. I've had some incredible mentors. I've been lucky enough to have some great mentees, formal and informal. You learn so much. It does lead to other connections, and it's really powerful. So lean into that too. How have I gone for time? Over time? Sorry.
No, it's been really amazing. And the reason why I didn't wrap it up earlier is because there's been so much incredible and valuable information here that I feel like you've addressed a lot of questions along the way. We do have time for a few questions. One of the ones that I've pulled out of the chat is from Katrina. What innovative approaches have you seen companies use to attract female candidates in this market?
Yes, so absolutely, you know, gender diversity, but diversity, accessibility, they're all still, you know, aspirations for organisations to do better. And thankfully, we have moved away from, you know, probably 5 years ago, where everyone felt the answer, what was innovative, was about quotas on shortlists and so forth. And actually now what we're finding is that organisations are being far more open-minded in terms of how they position roles for females, in terms of flexibility and in job share. We're actually part of an amazing program called Encoreship, which really incentivises organisations to return to the workforce women into their organisation on like a 3-month project that's relevant to their experience. And that becomes then a springboard for how they might kind of rebuild their career after a long break. Other things are really great learning and development opportunities that are specifically focused towards, you know, females and female leaders. And there's a number of organisations in FMCG that do that particularly well. But yeah, I mean, I think there's still a very big issue in terms of great female leaders in the right spots in organisations. And that's also part of how your research might inform you as far as where perhaps that might mean opportunity for you as well.
Amazing, thank you. One of the questions that's come through, not on the chat, but to us separately, is that there have been at times an unconscious bias around ethnicity of names and possibly gender.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts around how to get around that, especially when you're going for senior positions?
Yeah, I mean, tricky one. We've heard stories about people submitting CVs with names that they believe, you know, will get them the job and whatever else. I mean, it is absolutely heartbreaking. And look, I think in my mind, researching organisations that has real evidence of having progressed in terms of diversity and inclusion is critically important, because if you're applying for a role in an organisation that has no evidence of being focused around those things, where there's no evidence available to you in terms of your research on that business around having achieved that diversity, I mean, ultimately I wouldn't be applying for a role with that.
That's right. It goes back to what you were just saying about how, like, if the organisation doesn't align with your own personal values and you have to live in that environment every day, it's exhausting.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, discrimination or unconscious bias in terms of someone's CV is one thing. Imagine how that then plays out in the organisation if there is this kind of asbestos of, you know, discrimination against people. So I think it just comes back to that sharpening the axe. If you think that there's an organisation that you would like to work for, get under the surface and try to understand in exactly what their commitments are to diversity and inclusion, but also if you have an opportunity to talk to that business, get them to talk you through like real examples of how that's come to life. And if you're not getting those messages, if it's not written into their values, and if you don't see in their organisation chart that they have achieved that, then I would just be really cautious about, you know, what that means for you if it's important to you.
That's great advice, because there are plenty of organisations that are really focused on that, and you don't have to necessarily settle for one where you have to hide who you are. If you're hiding who you are from when you first submit your CV, it's only going one way from there.
Yeah, and I think people say we're really passionate about female leadership. It's like, okay, let's have a look at the board and let's have a look at the C-suite roles. And ultimately, if there are no females on those lists, I would say they've still got a way to go. That doesn't mean that it's not an opportunity for you, but you just need to be aware of I guess what people say versus what they've actually achieved in relation to that.
Definitely. That's so important. Thank you. Another question is, how can you negotiate salary without coming across as greedy or misunderstood?
Yeah, you need to base it on evidence and data. And I think yesterday, Hayes, which is a big multinational recruitment firm, they published a salary survey. And I would do your homework, right? I would do your homework on what your current value is. This market that's shifted. Salary surveys, talking to recruiters around, you know, the types of roles that they are recruiting at your level and what the salaries are. But just be informed. Like, you have to be able to give a rationale as to what you're looking for and why. So yeah, I mean, I think negotiating salary in a process is another reflection of your values as well. So do it in a way that you believe, you know, is true to you. It is obviously a great opportunity in this type of market to negotiate a salary increase. And that's likely to happen anyway. But I would just say be informed, use evidence, but be true to yourself in terms of how you would, you know, normally navigate those conversations, because it does say a lot, you know, I guess, about the type of employee that they're going to hopefully recruit to their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more question before we wrap up, which is more important, technical or leadership skills?
Leadership all the way. Yeah, I really believe that. I mean, technical skills can be learned, and I think leadership is about the sum of experiences that you have over time. So we would always say that leadership trumps any kind of technical or even industry experience, if it is that you're able to, describe your leadership capability in a really compelling way. Now, of course, that is not always true when it comes to highly technical roles in medical and whatever else. So that's a general statement. But yeah, I would say, particularly as you start to progress through your career, you can have the greatest technical know-how, but without great leadership capability, you will reach a ceiling. And that, I know, is a fact.
Thank you. And Suzie, thank you so much for giving us your time, your expertise, sharing your experience, and for giving some really amazing practical insights and tips into what's happening in this market at the moment. For me, I think the biggest takeaway that I have is do your work, like understand what's important to you, understand your values, do your research, understand the organizations that you're approaching. And again, I mean, which we say all the time around Mentor Walks, the value of networking in your community is unparalleled. And I think Lisa mentioned take the negativity out of networking, and it works well if it works both ways. Like when you're doing the work on yourself, understand what your value proposition is and be able to go to people and say, this is what I want from you and this is what I can give you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we say as well, like if you think about looking for a job is somewhat similar to looking for real estate, and you wouldn't go and jump in your car and go to inspections without thinking, what area do I want to live in? You know, what type of house are we looking for? Who are the agents that we think? So just think of it a little bit like looking for a house. You've got to do your research and you've got to spend time. Otherwise, you might spin your wheels and spend a whole lot of valuable time that gets you nowhere. But thank you very much. If there's anything from the chat that we think we can build on in the follow-up in terms of other articles or whatever else, I'll work with the mentor walks guys to make sure that we can get back to you on as much specific stuff. But thank you for listening.
Amazing. Thank you. And we'll be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow with those QR codes and the other resources that link back to your website as well. So thank you again, Suzie, so much. And thank you everyone for being with us tonight. And we will see you at the next Mentor Walks event.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Have a good night. Stay safe.